Hello and welcome to the Lighthouse. Welcome to our hands-on mapping event. My name is Greg Kehret. I am the Senior Director of the Media and Accessible Design Lab, otherwise known as the MAD Lab. Again, thank you for joining us. It means quite a lot to us to have you all here today. We could not have pulled off this event without support from our sponsors and our donors. So we'd like to express our gratitude to Waymo for their $10,000 Tactile Titan sponsorship. Yes. Zoox for their $5,000 Platinum sponsorship. Uber for their $5,000 Platinum sponsorship. LightHouse CEO Sharon Giovinazzo for her $1,000 silver sponsorship. And here's something that I hope you can all really enjoy, Three Sticks Wines of Sonoma for their wine donation. We'd also like to express our appreciation for the many of you here in the audience who made donations online when you registered for the event. Last I heard, we had received over $600 in donations, so thank you very much. Just another shameless plug. There is a donation QR code up at the registration desk, so if at any time you feel so inclined and inspired, we appreciate donations on any level. A few brief housekeeping notes. We've set this room with tables for a reason, because there are going to be some hands-on activities. At this moment, we don't have a full house. Some of the chairs were like flipped around so everyone could face the front. In short, feel free to rotate your chairs, whichever orientation you like. Be natural, be expansive, get comfortable. No intermission is scheduled. But restrooms, the most easily found, are in the elevator lobby where you came in. There are Lighthouse staff and volunteers who can assist in guiding you there if you require some help or desire it, and certainly helping you get back to your seat. Emergency egress. In the unlikely event that we all need to leave the building, you exit this room and immediately turn left. Just do a hard left and keep walking. It turns into a narrow corridor that leads to stairs that take you essentially to Market Street, very close to the front door of this building. And of course, if we were to do that, it would all be very orderly, calm. This building has a lot of built-in safety features. Nobody has to panic. We have a lot of time to get down to the street. We have a legendary lineup today. Our speakers are heavy hitters. They're deep thinkers. They're industry thought leaders, virtuosos in their field of access to information. Today's program is a Tactile Maps conference in miniature. So pretty much any of the segments that we're going to be going through today are like speed dating versions of, it could be like a 90-minute presentation at a conference, right? So we've taken a conference for an entire day's program and mashed it into, 90 minutes or so. We're going to be hearing about TMAP, Tactile Maps Automated Production. We're going to learn about how to read tactile maps by touch. We're going to learn a bit about designing map symbols using non-visual tools. We are all going to have a chance to design our own tactile maps. And we're going to hear about the future of digital tactile maps. And if all that is not enough, we are also going to have a panel discussion that is going to tie a lot of these concepts together and introduce some new ideas and things to talk about. That will be Josh Miele, Chancey Fleet, Ting Siu. 5 o'clock marks the end of the formal program, but the bartender is booked until 5:30. So anyone who wants to stick around, right, you can. And it's at that time, we'll have some demos. There's a room just outside the room we're in, 1040, which has some swell machines, some thermoform machines, an APH Monarch will be on display in there. Some of us in the Mad Lab, including Frank Welte, who you'll meet a little bit later, will be giving some informal tours of our Mad Lab shop on the 9th floor. So before we dive headlong into everything, I would like to introduce our fearless and intrepid leader, the LightHouse CEO, Sharon Giovinazzo, who has a few words she'd like to share with y'all. Yeah.
You've met me, right?
Yeah. You gonna hold that?
A few words, you've met me, right?
Yeah.
I know, right? Thank you, Sherry. I expected some heckling from the audience out there. So good afternoon, everybody, and thank you so much for coming to the Lighthouse for the Blind today for our hands-on mapping event. Woo! So with you being here today, it underscores a shared commitment to enhancing geoliteracy and making our world an easier to navigate and accessible to everyone. As you delve into today's activities, I want to highlight a fundamental truth. For many people, the ability to navigate their environments visually is an immense advantage. Sighted individuals often take this capability for granted, effortlessly reading maps, recognizing landmarks, and orienting themselves with ease. For those of us who are blind or have low vision, the lack of access to such tools can pose significant challenges. You will learn the history and the genius or geniuses behind hands-on mapping. One of my favorite experiences since moving to San Francisco was a spirited debate that I had with one of our own, Jerry Kuns, about the layout of the streets north of Market Street. I had confidently navigated those streets on a daily basis, only to realize when presented with a tactile map that I had been mistaken about their arrangement and that Jerry indeed was right. This wasn't the first time, and I doubt that it will be the last time, right, Jerry? But that moment of clarity, I could truly see the neighborhood and understand the nuances, and it was really profound. It highlighted the critical role that accessible maps and tactile tools play with bridging the gaps to geoliteracy. Today, you will have the opportunity to explore and engage with the very tools that can make this kind of understanding possible. None of this would be achievable without the exceptional, talented staff who bring the magic of the Mad Lab to life, and from the generous support of our donors and our contributors. Your commitment to helping us teach the language of lines and spatial awareness is invaluable. I'm confident that today's presentations will be both enjoyable and enlightening, maybe even eye-opening. So I encourage you to fully immerse yourselves in the experiences and learn as much as you can. Ask as many questions as you want. Together, we're making strides toward a more inclusive world where everyone can navigate with confidence and ease. Thank you for being here today and for supporting our mission, and enjoy the event.
Thank you. Thank you, Sharon. Okay. This next gentleman who I'm going to introduce got us into this mess. This is the reason we're all here today. The instigator, Josh Miele. I guess Professor Dr. Joshua Miele, Amazon Principal Accessibility Researcher, 2021 MacArthur Foundation Fellow, scientist, community leader, inventor with a history of developing innovative accessibility solutions for blind people, including the Lighthouse's TMAP, Tactile Maps Automated Production. Josh, would you like to join us and give a few words?
Thank you, everybody. Thank you, Greg. Thank you, Sharon. Amazing to be here today. This is an incredible day because it's really the first time that we've gotten together as a community to recognize the incredible work that the Lighthouse does on creating tactile materials and promoting tactile literacy for the blind and visually impaired community. The work that the Mad Lab does here at the Lighthouse is mighty and profound and is often overshadowed by the amazing other work that the Lighthouse does. We are astonished by the Enchanted Hills Camp and the adult and youth programming that the Lighthouse runs. We are thrilled to be able to come here and buy cane tips and other adaptive materials at the store. But the work that the Lighthouse does in tactile materials and tactile maps is not only unique to an organization like this, but is leading the technology and the industry globally. We have here at the Lighthouse a team of people who are more highly qualified, more experienced in creating tactile maps and other tactile materials than any other team in the world that I know about. Let's give them a hand. So I have a long history with the Lighthouse. I spent over 10 years on the board of directors of the Lighthouse, 4 years of which I spent as president of the board. During that time, some extraordinary things happened. We moved from a much smaller building to this building. We built an incredible world-class home base for the world-class programs and activities that the Lighthouse offers. And we made, we went from a less than $1 million annual budget organization to a much larger organization. But the thing that I am the most proud of over that time is actually the work that the Mad Lab grew from a small set of people who knew how to do Braille translation and create tactile or Braille booklets, to a team of people who were creating the best tactile maps and graphics in the world. And that was only in part because, well, we collected amazing people like Naomi and Greg and so many others at who you'll be hearing from today. And I just want to say, we are so lucky as a blind and visually impaired community to have this resource. And bringing you all together today to recognize, honor, and build better understanding of what this resource represents for us and the undervalued importance of tactile maps for blind and visually impaired people. That's the message for today. We want you to come away from our conversations and workshops today with a new understanding, a broadened scope of what tactile maps mean for this community. And I just, before we plunge into the sort of hands-on mapping agenda, I just want to say thank you to each and every one of you for taking the time, for valuing tactile maps, for being interested in maps in general. And I want to encourage you to think about connecting not just today, but in the future. This is a resource that people who care about maps and who understand the value of bringing maps and tactile materials to blind people should be supporting. And thank you for supporting it today. And I want us to build a community, not just an event. So thank you. So I think the next thing on the agenda is actually me. So in the interest of time, Greg, did you want to say any words before I sort of plummet boldly forward here?
Just to reiterate that what we're going to be talking about for the next 10 or 15 minutes or so is TMAP. It's Tactile Maps Automated Production. So I invented TMAP when I was a postdoctoral researcher at the Smith Kettlewell Eye Research Institute over in Pacific Heights. It was, I am a blind person. I have always loved tactile maps. I grew up with tactile maps, but the tactile maps I grew up with were maps of the United States or maps of the globe, or maybe if I was lucky, I could get a map of the New York State area. But I never had maps of the streets around my school or my neighborhood, or how to get from my house to the 7-Eleven. There were no practical tactile maps in my experience. There were only sort of geographical and educational maps. And I have, as a map lover, wanted to change this. And
I didn't just have to invent the technology, I actually had to push back against a body of literature in the scientific world, in the blindness research world, that said blind people don't use maps, they don't benefit from maps, and they shouldn't, no, I mean, this is an inference I made, or that most people would make. You shouldn't waste your time giving blind people maps. And I, as a blind person, and as not just from my own experience, but from the experience that I had with so many of my blind friends and colleagues, I knew that wasn't true. And so I had to push back on this research that had been done in the 60s and 70s with blindfolded sighted undergraduates using one finger with 9 fingers taped down and 1 finger. And so of course, the research, let's just all remember that blindfolded sighted undergraduates are not equivalent to blind people. So I not only developed the technology that would automatically create tactile street maps, but I sort of tried to create some literature that would push back on this and support other researchers who were doing that work. I will say I'm much happier when I'm building things than when I'm writing academic papers. So building TMAP was much more fun than writing the papers. And I realized that if I could put TMAP out into the world and get people a cheap, easy, ready access to street maps, if people just started using it, I didn't have to worry as much about the literature, right? So that's what I did. And early on, I created a website that anybody could download a file and print out a tactile street map of anywhere they wanted in the US. And it was amazing, it was really cool. And early on, I realized blind people, not only is it, I realized that there was an additional barrier. The additional barrier was the technology at the customer end, where people needed to make sure their printer was set up right and make sure their browser was set up right, and then print it out, make sure that it was on the right size paper. All of this stuff was very tough. And it was at that time in 2007 that the LightHouse reached out to me and said, hey, we heard about this TMAP thing you're doing. How about if we produce TMAPs for our customers, for our clients, for our students? And I was like, hell yeah, let's do that. And it was amazing. The LightHouse was my first partner, my first real large-scale user of TMAP. And there were a number of other projects that I did in collaboration with the LightHouse at that time, including the BART station maps, which we maybe won't talk too much about today, but super proud of those. Thank you. And a number of other things. And I'm going to fast forward to about 2012, 2013, when TMAP broke. I was running it on an old system. I had moved on. I was doing other projects. I didn't have time to maintain an antique system. TMAP died. And Frank Welte at the LightHouse every 6 months or so would write me an email and say, hey, we've got a lot of people that really want TMAPs, just wondering if you're going to get to it. And, I would try to be nice, but of course, TMAP, I love it. It's my baby. And it made me sad that, so I might have, sounded frustrated to Frank, but I was frustrated with myself. Finally, I got a grant from the Department of Education at Smith Kettlewell. Smith Kettlewell got the grant. And part of that grant was to rebuild TMAP from the ground up and give it to the LightHouse. And that's what we did. And so one of the things that I want to that I was fighting at the beginning was people would say, oh, maps are so visual. Maps are blind people. Why would blind people need maps? They're so visual, and the thing that I would always say to these folks, maps are not visual. Maps are spatial. Maps are a spatial representation of geography. And it doesn't matter if you represent them with ink or if you represent them with raised lines, they carry meaning, and the meaning is spatial. And so blind people of course, not only do blind people benefit from tactile maps, but we benefit from them more in many ways. Where sighted people can stand at an intersection and look around and see what the layout of that intersection is, a blind person can't do that. And the only way to figure out the layout of an intersection without a map is to have someone describe it, which is laborious, or, and if you have someone to do that, or to basically do it by trial and error, which is kind of sketchy. Okay. So it's not just, if you show on a map the shape of an intersection, it is instantly apparent what that intersection is doing, how it's laid out, what the connectivity of those streets is. It is actually a more important tool for us in many ways than it is for sighted people. There's a lot more to say. As Greg said, we could do a whole conference on this.
Yeah.
I'm going to hand it over to Greg. Greg, I've been sort of talking about the philosophy and origin of TMAP. Greg is going to talk about how it works.
Yeah, the nuts and bolts of it. So when you came into this room and were seated at the table, you may have noticed there is a tactile map on the table in front of you. That is a TMAP, tactile map. That was generated with TMAP. And so I'll give you a quick overview of what this thing is, a little more granular detail than the 30,000-foot view that Josh spoke about. I also put the image on the screen behind me, and I'll try to rush through so I can do a quick demo, and I'll narrate as I go. So TMAP, or Tactile Maps Automated Production, is a screen reader friendly tool, and that's an important detail. It's not just a tool for sighted people to make maps for blind people. It is a tool that even if you're blind, you can use this tool to generate your own tactile maps. The maps use raised lines to represent roads, pedestrian paths, railways. TMAP works best at the scale of a neighborhood, anywhere from a few blocks to a few miles wide. Using TMAPs, the map files are ready to emboss on View Plus embossers, APH Pixblaster, Swellform machines, and they can be displayed on the APH Monarch refreshable braille display. With TMAP, and this is also an important detail, map creation is automated. So there's no need to draw lines. You don't have to design and label the map. And this really greatly expedites things and speeds it up. For anyone who's spent time making maps, making your own tactile maps, you know it can be a very time intensive process. That said, these maps can benefit from customization, especially after embossed, you know, whether sticking bump dots on them for your mark your favorite coffee shop, extra braille labels, adding routes with wiki sticks or something like that. Now, on the map itself that you have in front of you, I'm just going to mention some of the features that appear on there. TMAP tactile maps are always titled with an address in the upper left. And that address is marked with a locator dot, which is an open circle on the map. In the upper right, each map has a north arrow, as well as a scale line that's labeled with the equivalent real world distance. For legibility, you shouldn't superimpose braille atop raised lines. It's not like with visual maps where you can use a different font or a different color or a transparency. So streets that reach the edge of the map are labeled in the margins, and those braille labels are abbreviated to save space. TMAPs can also show paths and railways. I don't believe the maps in front of you don't have those features. Clutter is the enemy of good tactile design. So we recommend when you play around with TMAP that you select just one feature in addition to streets to reduce map clutter. However, your mileage will vary. It depends on the area being mapped. Dense urban environments are more apt or more prone to be cluttered than suburban or rural areas. Now, there's a second page stapled to that map. That second page is the key. Each map has a key. This includes the locator dot, labeled with its corresponding address. It shows the line types used in the map and abbreviated street names written out in full and their directional orientation. So for instance, on this map, MRK is Market Street, yes, and it runs northeast to southwest, which is noted by NE-SW. All right, I got just enough time to do a real quick demo of how TMAP works. So it's very simple. I often liken it to like Google Maps for blind people. You basically are using a search bar to enter a street address, a point of interest. You could even put lat longe coordinates in it if you wanted to. And from that, you can then choose your map settings like different paper sizes and orientation and your map scale. You can choose the features to put on the map, and you can preview the map file, and you can download it or email it. So on the screen behind me, I will just put the cursor in the "Where are you traveling?" the search bar. Does anyone want to give me an address? And we'll just generate a map on the fly here.
97th.
97th Street.
97th Street.
How about a city to go with it? Okay.
90.
Oh, 97th
Yeah, it's right around
Street. Oh, that one. Yeah. In San Francisco.
90.
That's all right. This will probably do it. So this uses.
Also sign up for a TMAP and generate your own maps too. Great.
Oh, I'll get there. How come I'm not in here right now? Let me log in. What? Oh, is it going to the, you know what? I thought I had cleared my browser. You know what? Sorry. Wah, wah. You know what? I like loaded the wrong TMAP in here, and now it's not like, that's disappointing. Huh? Maybe. If I don't pull it up like real quick, like a pro, yeah. Okay, ta-da, I'm back in the game. All right. Yes, I can do that too. All right, I'm going to 907th Street in San Francisco. I even misspelled San Francisco, but I bet you Google is going to figure it out. Yes, it did. Turns out this is the Federal Building right around the corner from here. We can choose, there's a default for the paper size. It always defaults to 11.5 by 11, which is standard size for Braille paper, a map scale of 1 to 5,000 and distance units of feet, but we have different paper sizes. You can do letter size, you can do tabloid, you can do landscape, you can do portrait. Map scales vary. 1 to 5,000 is showing us, a few blocks. If I went 1 to 50,000, it would look like a plate of spaghetti, and that was a big, couple square miles of San Francisco. I'm going back to 1 to 5,000. As far as map features, there are service roads, which could be alleyways. More often than not, it's places that are kind of semi-private roads, like on a college campus. So they're not meant for vehicular traffic, but you will get utility vehicles and things like that. Paths could be anything from pedestrian paths to hiking trails to bridle paths to bike paths. It basically means cars don't go here. And railways are any surface street train tracks. So it won't show you elevated tracks. It won't show you underground. And I didn't mention, by the way, that when I loaded this page, when I typed in the address, it did load a visual map preview. And once you're more or less satisfied with your map, you can click the Create button. And I will do that. and it's either thinking or I didn't click it well. There we go. This advances us to the download page, and it actually shows us on the screen a visual preview of the map file itself. This is probably the one, this preview is the one aspect that as a screen reader user, it doesn't really give you any meaningful feedback about what that image is. If you really want to know about that map, you do have to download it and emboss it. You can also email it to yourself or to someone you know who has an embosser or something like that. It's pretty easy to use. It was designed to be that way so that you don't have to think too hard about all the different things that might have to go into producing a map. Now, how to get TMAP? Anyone can sign up for a free user account to generate, print your own maps. Visit tmap.lighthouse-sf.org. This can also be found on the Lighthouse's website, if you don't remember that. Links to the FAQ, detailed steps on how to use TMAP, printing instructions can all be found there. If you don't have a way to emboss your own map file, you can order from the Lighthouse's store, adaptations.org. So this is an item in their catalog. You can also call them at their 1-888-400-8933. I mentioned that TMAP tactile maps ordered through Adaptations, you get the map at two different scales. One typically zoomed in, which will have less detail, but is also less dense, less cluttered, and one that is zoomed out. So it represents a larger geographic area. It'll have more information in it, but can be more complex. And finally, if anyone is interested in collaborating on improving TMAP via our GitHub repository, please get in touch with the Mad Lab in any way, shape, or form. We have a lot of business cards around here with our contact information. On our website, we also even have a crowdsourcing form that you can fill out if you want to give us your name and contact information. And that concludes the TMAP segment. And we're probably only about 5 minutes behind schedule now. So next up is going to be Frank Welte and Jerry Kuns, and they're going to be talking about reading tactile maps by touch. Frank Welte, Senior Braille, Accessible Media and Braille Specialist here at the Lighthouse. Jerry, I'll give you a quick spiel. He's worked as a vocational counselor and supervisor for the California Department of Rehabilitation. He helped form Sensory Access Foundation to explore emerging technologies to enhance education objectives and develop employment opportunities for people with visual issues.
That was 50 years ago.
Amen. Well, I'm going to bring you up to speed. He contributed to the formation of HumanWare, manufacturer of adaptive technologies for people who are blind. He was a technology specialist for the California Department of Education. He retired in 2014, and now, in addition to consulting for companies developing information access tools, he spends a lot of time helping the Mad Lab and guiding us in our map pursuits. So, Jerry.
I'm going to give you a lavalier.
It is.
Oh, nice. You're good.
All right, where's our table here? There we go. Okay, Jerry, you in your spot?
I'm in my spot.
All right, so well, hello, everybody. You've met us now. I'm Frank Welte, and I am a senior accessible media and Braille specialist here at the Lighthouse. I've been working with Greg for 13 years, and he still keeps me around, which is really cool. And my primary work duties in the Mad Lab are doing Braille transcription and proofreading. So pretty much everything that you're going to see here today from the Mad Lab, my hands were on first. So there. One thing I want to add is that Jerry, along with all of his stellar accomplishments, is probably the #1 member of the World Tactile Graphics Tactile Maps fan club. He loves them. He said that he's never happier than when he has a tactile map in one hand and a beer in the other. And Jerry So we've heard why we have tactile maps. You've heard how our TMAPs are done, created, and work. Now you're going to find out exactly how we use tactile maps, tactile TMAPs, and that'll apply to other tactile graphics. And Jerry's going to tell you all about that.
I think my calling was always to know where I was and to be able to find myself. I love maps, and I have used maps all over North America provided by our wonderful Mad Lab. I am I probably have at least 24 maps of cities and places that I've gone, including I was in Australia in the outback on a farm, and happened to have pictures on a flash machine and some capsule paper, and I wanted to know what was around me. I printed that map on a very large scale, probably 1,000 feet, or maybe it was a 2,000-foot scale, and I found out that there were very few roads out there. So in the outback, yeah. The components of TMAPs are very important to me, and I'm going to address the map key before we look at and appreciate the map itself. That's the second page of the 11 by 11.5 map handout here. So to me, understanding a map is very, very important. And to do that, you need to know the symbols. You need to know what is there and what it represents. So one of the symbols is on TMAP, a round circle, which represents the address, the street location to which the map has been accommodating. And usually it is in the physical center of the map page. In our case today, you're going to find it a little bit lower and to the right to accommodate some other things I want to point out. So we have a map address including the city and state. We have a street line indicating what kind of lines are being used to signify streets. Paths, railroads are indicated by different shapes of lines, so you can tell if you have other kinds of, and even freeways could be a different type of line. So always look at the indicators for the kinds of pathways and streets that you might encounter on your map. Then we have a key of the name in abbreviated form, the street name written out, and the direction of travel of the street name. Those are all very important bits when you're looking at a map for orientation. So the key is very important. In this case, we are going to be looking at several elements, so you might be flipping back and forth between your map page and your key. I'm back on the map page, and the first thing I see at the top, Greg has pointed out, we have an address, and our address street location is 1155, this building on Market Street. You'll notice that that symbol is in the lower right quarter of the map. We have a scale. I love scale. As I said, in the outback, I might have had, half mile to the inch or my line symbol. In this case, we have 250 feet to a nearly 2-inch long line. So that means that we have a fairly close view of what's around this location. We also know that TMAPs are typically printed with the north at the top edge of the map. And to know that you have your map oriented correctly, the staple should be in the upper left corner, and the the direction indicator, the compass rose, should be in the upper right corner with an upward pointing arrowhead and an N above it. First thing I'm going to do after I've looked at the top of my map is I'm going to put my hands fairly flat on the whole surface of the map just to get an idea of the overview of the map. I'm not going to look at any detail. I'm just browsing the whole thing to find out that I have several lines running up and down, left and right, and some diagonal lines. That's my first approach to looking at a map. Then I'm going to focus in on more specific information. And I'm going to ask you to help me out with this. How many streets are running north and south? Directly north-south. Yes, you got it. Yes, 3. And how many streets are running east-west?
3. Complete streets.
They're all complete streets. So somebody found an unlabeled street in the middle and didn't think it was a complete street. Happens to be a street. And it runs between a really good area here, right just north of the lighthouse. And it's on the north side of the San Francisco Public Library main headquarters. Okay, so I really like that kind of information. There's a street that runs diagonally. What is that street? How do you know that? Ah, the key. It's got an abbreviation. So it runs from what direction at the left to the right? Very good. You guys are good map readers already. I want to point out a couple of things that aren't on my talk outline, but I want you to look at where 7th Street crosses Market. And what direction is it going from 7th? Okay, from northwest to southeast. This is important. You see that intersection at 7th and Market is a plus style intersection. Way good information for orientation. You know you can cross 7th or Market pretty much like you're walking across straight. Let's move over to 8th Street and Market and look at the north side of Market. Tell me what streets are running into Market.
Yeah, more common Grove and Hyde.
Grove and Hyde, and it's a little bit more complicated as an intersection. Yes, it looks kind of like a plus with a Y at the top of it, but it is a little bit complicated when we're crossing it because to cross on the southwest side of 8th, you actually have to walk a ways to the southwest along Market to actually get to the crosswalk. We don't have that indicated on our map, but that is something that you can learn by exploring. And it is pretty exciting when you don't know where the heck you are. Everybody found the lighthouse symbol on which side of Market Street? South and east. And it's between 2 streets. And I have to throw in a plug for BART station maps. They are so useful. Oh, if you can learn to read the BART station map using the key and all the different symbols in the BART stations. You can travel BART so much more simply, comfortably, and safely than if you have no idea what that station is laid out like before you get to it the first time. And I actually have had a wonderful O&M lesson at Glen Park BART just a couple of weeks ago and learned how to navigate that station. And then I went out to SFO, fortunately, with a mobility instructor, and I started learning to find my way from the BART to the AirTram, to Terminal 3, and to United Airlines ticketing, and I got back. I love maps. Frank, back to you.
Okay, Greg, how are we doing on time? We have some time for questions?
We can take a few quick questions.
Okay, great. We have some questions. I can't see you, so just call out my name. I'm Frank, so just call out my name if you want to do a question.
Frank?
Who in the front?
Yes, I have a question.
Okay, let's get you on the mic.
So my question is, can you add more keys and location marks to the map? Like for
Yes.
example, Jerry just mentioned BART. I would, think people benefit knowing how to get from one location to another.
Yes. Now, when you're creating the map, you only have the one, you enter an address or an intersection, and that's as much as you can do there. But once you've created the map and once you've embossed it, you can put stuff on it. So you can customize it. You can get bump dots, or you can use wiki sticks and other stuff that you can get in our adaptation story, by the way. And you can just work up your own map. And, like if you want to put certain buildings on there, you can put those in there, and you can do all kinds of fun stuff. And the great thing about these maps, especially in an educational setting, is, for example, if you're an orientation or mobility instructor, you can generate one of these maps in minutes, right? And then you can customize it, but you've got the basic layout all set for you. So it's really quick and easy to customize, and so it can really speed up the process of preparing a customized map for one of your students or for yourself.
Can I say
A
something
quick
quickly?
additional plug on BART maps. They do have street surface areas, and those street surface areas do include not only the approach to BART, but the intersections, bus stops, taxi stops, and other information around the BART maps. I hope we can just intrigue other transit systems to having MadLab build maps for their transit systems.
Frank, Frank, can I say something quickly?
Yeah, Josh.
Just about so the process Frank just described would be great for a sighted person to assist a blind person. How would a blind person do that independently? The data is all there. We have the data. We know where the BART entrances are. We know all that stuff. It's a matter of creating a user interface that would allow a blind person to independently mark that stuff up and add it to the map before embossing. It's not, the data is not the problem. Figuring out what the right way to allow a blind person to do that independently is the next trick to do. So
Love to do it if we could get the funding. Yes. Hobie.
Oh.
Yeah.
Hobie.
Hey.
Oh, sorry, Hobie. I've given the mic to someone here on the front row.
Yeah.
Hi. This is a related question. Can I make maps of the insides of buildings like SFO? Because that's a confusing area for me. And can I make truly custom aesthetic maps that don't relate to real geographic spaces for artistic reasons?
So not really with TMAP. What the TMAP will do is based on street layouts, you can get the basic map and then you can customize them. TMAP does not work on indoor spaces. It also tends not to work well on, say, like college campuses. You can get, there are ways you can tweak it to do sort of buildings or paths. But if you don't do that, if you just show the street, when you do the address of a university, what you usually see is that about half the map will show the streets on one particular side of the university, and the rest of the map will just be this open space. So yeah.
But stick around and ask Chancey and Marco that question.
Yes, so even though it's TMAP isn't optimized for those two use cases, it's still a great start.
So I'm Hobie, we'll have to get back to you. I'm gonna grab the mic take control of this program again, because these are some very interesting and in-depth questions. So I think that we should consider taking some of these things at the end, the formal end rather, but while the bar's still open. And we can network and talk about some of these things. And also because some of the questions are veering on things that we're going to be talking about anyway. So, so thank you very much, Jerry, Frank. So next up, we are going to be hearing from Chancey Fleet and from Marco Salsiccia.
Perfect. I don't want to sit down because this is a lightning talk. I don't want to get too comfortable.
Make sure can you hear me okay?
I think we can, yeah. So Chancey Fleet is the Assistive Technology Coordinator at the New York Public Library. Chancey founded the Dimensions Project, a free open lab for the exploration and creation of accessible images, models, and data representations through tactile graphics, 3D models, and non-visual approaches to coding, CAD, and visual arts. And Marco Salsiccia is a blind software engineer focused on native mobility, mobile accessibility at Intuit. He also loves teaching tactile drawing and SVG coding techniques to build tactile and digital graphics, along with helping other blind and low vision creatives tap into their artistic potential. And they are going to be talking about designing map symbols using non-visual tools.
Great.
Thanks, everybody. Good afternoon. I am Chancey Fleet, coming to you from New York Public Library. We have up on the slides, you can visit us at talkingbooks.nypl.org if you want. And so I'm a tech educator at a public library. And what that usually means is that I help people figure out how to use their phones and computers and things like that. But as a tech educator, it's my job to always interrogate what's possible and to try to connect folks to practices that can benefit them and empower them to understand and express themselves within our world. And so around 2017, I founded the Dimensions Project, which proposes to provide blind and sighted folks with a free and open lab where anyone can come and create tactile graphics and also deepen their tactile graphics proficiency and create a community of practice around tactile graphics. And I am not a map maker or artist or coder or anything like that by training. And the way that I had the guts to do this as a blind person is in large part having LightHouse and the Mad Lab and TMAP as beacons, seeing the quality of work that can be done and thinking like, hey, I really want to be part of that. And I also want people in our blind community to know that we can all be not only users of these things, but creators and influencers of these things. And so Mad Lab has meant a lot to me for a good long time, as has TMAP, just showcasing how precise and concise and beautiful tactile maps can be and how important they are in their world, in our world. And it's my honor to carry that forward at the work that we do at Dimensions Lab. Marco, I'll turn it over to you.
So hey everyone, my name is Marco Salsiccia. I am a software engineer over at Intuit. I'm a blind designer, and I actually created the website blindsvg.com, which we'll be talking about later on in our talk here. So I actually lost my vision very suddenly in 2014. Prior to that, I was a senior animator, a visual effects artist, and a motion graphics designer. So creating vector images, drawing, and telling visual stories was my life for almost 14 years. Losing my vision, I didn't think I would be able to kind of interact with that world again. And so I just sort of focused on accessibility and moved forward into my engineering and coding career now. I met Chancey at NFB in 2022, and she's the one that actually introduced me to tactile drawing techniques using tactile surfaces, which we'll also talk about. and also introduced me to SVG graphics, or using SVG code to build digital graphics in a non-visual way. Both of those reintroduced me to my artistic side, and now, I have the absolute pleasure of being able to teach more folks and introduce them to their own creative sides through all this work. So it's awesome to be here today.
So the problem that we're here to illuminate and explore and offer a particular approach to today is the problem of CAD. So most computer assisted design programs out there are really visual, inaccessible to blind people in a couple of ways. Of course, there's the challenge of making a tactile canvas, which you'll hear more about later from Mike, but also just the low-hanging fruit like sliders and controls. All the mainstream CAD programs are not really tackling that in a great way. And as Marco mentioned, we use something quite extensively at the library called the sensational blackboard, which is basically a rubberized surface mounted on plastic. And when you draw firmly with a pen, it creates a bold, pleasing tactile line. Mm-hmm. And that's great. But after we're done hand drawing and ideating, of course, we want and need to be able to draw digitally so that we have the precision offered by digital workflows and the revision, the revisability, and shareability that digital creation allows. And so the approach that we offer today is an on-road for anyone who is blind to create our own symbol sets and map components and other tactile graphic artifacts through SVG, scalable vector graphics.
Yeah, so all you need to do to write scalable vector graphics is just have access to a text editing program. So Notepad++ over on Windows, or TextEdit on the Mac, or anything that you're comfortable using, and saving out as a .svg file. I built the website blindsvg.com out of a collaboration with Chancey's library and the SVG study group, where we had blind people worldwide come in and join us on like a virtual meeting every month, or actually every week to start off, to talk about this coding process. And I started doing a lot of research online on how to learn how to code SVG. And what I found is that a lot of it was built specifically and only for sighted web developers. Scalable vector graphics were initially built to work on websites to allow vector graphics to scale infinitely from a tiny little phone screen up to a massive like movie display. Anything that we can create in SVG is infinitely scalable because it's all done in math and just a bit of code on a computer, as opposed to painting it with pixels. Going through all of those websites, I needed to simplify it down into a way that was understandable and relevant to how we produce graphics for tactile production. So here at the Mad Lab, building things with for output for an embosser, swell form, thermoform, 3D printing, UV printing. All of those methods require specific style and aesthetic that we can easily attain using SVG code.
So SVG code is suitable as a design tool, pretty approachable, and I also believe it to be an entry point for blind people who want to explore coding using a lightweight code base and tangible output that has a real world impact. We find that SVG is particularly relevant to mapping because, of course, we all know here at LightHouse that blind people must be at the center of tactile graphics creation and dissemination if we want graphics to serve our wants and needs and to be as good as they can be. Blind SVG allows us to compose our own symbol sets, collaborate across blind and sighted team members, and importantly, become proficient ourselves in design considerations like line weight, dot height, via color, scale, things like that, so that we can all be contributing parts of the conversation.
Yeah, I'm really happy to hear that someone asked specifically, how can we create our own symbols and maps themselves? So that's exactly what we're here for today. So I think with the next slide that we have, I have a demonstration showing I built some symbols for tactile maps. These are specifically also from the BART map. So I built 4 graphics. One of them is a symbol depicting an elevator. One of them is a symbol depicting a compass rose. One of them is a stairwell, and one of them is a set of fare gates and a fence. These are really important things you want to find when you're navigating a BART BART station, or if you want to put these into a map. All of these were done purely in SVG code. And for those of you who don't know what the symbols look like, the elevator itself is a square with an open bottom edge. And then there's an X connecting the bottom left corner to the top right corner and the top left corner to the bottom right corner. And it's just one line, pretty easy to determine the entry and exit of the elevator. So I actually took a little bit of an artistic liberty on the compass rose. I think my BART maps have it set with a circle and an arrow pointing in the direction of north, because in BART maps, north doesn't always point up, but with the TMAPs, they always point up. So yeah, artistic liberty. It's a circle with an arrow pointing at about a 35-degree angle. The stairwell is an open rectangle. So the bottom of the rectangle is open, and then there's a series of horizontal lines representing the risers of the stairs. And the fare gates is a horizontal line that is broken apart by 5 rounded rectangles that are vertical and thin. So they represent kind of the passageway you would walk through to go through a fare gate that breaks up the fence. And those are really important to kind of feel, and they feel pretty cool in tactile form as well. And if we move on to the next slide for the elevator, you can actually see how the SVG code is fashioned. So the syntax, as Chancey said, is fairly lightweight. It's XML. So if you're familiar with HTML and CSS already, you're already a really good step ahead of, on the pathway to building your own graphics. And Blind SVG will teach you, if you have no knowledge at all of HTML or CSS, it will guide you from beginning to end, from creating your own graphics all the way up to final export. With the elevator itself, I drew the elevator in a 200 by 200 square. What to know about SVG is that the top left corner of your canvas is your 0, 0. 0 on X, 0 on Y. It's the ultimate origin of your drawing. It's not the center, it's the top left. So with my elevator, the code is actually using what's called a path shape. And the path shape has what's called an attribute, which is just something that's equal to some values. And the values that you input into this attribute are actually determining what draws the shape itself. So the code that's building the elevator is using a series of letter operators that are, you're literally telling the program, I have a pen, I'm going to put this pen on the canvas. I'm moving the pen to a point on the canvas. So M to move to a point that's 200 units down on Y, but 0 on X. I'm just starting in the bottom left corner. I have another operator that says L, draw a line to the next XY coordinates. I'm drawing up to 0, 0. Then I'm drawing a line over to 200 on X, but I'm not moving down. And I'm drawing down to finish the box and just make the left top and right edge of my box. Then I'm moving the pen to the bottom left corner and drawing up to the top right corner. And then I'm moving the pen to the top left corner, drawing down to the bottom right corner to complete the X inside the elevator. And all of this you learn on Blind SVG. The path is a very complex tool, but it's very, very useful in terms of drawing paths, straight lines, and also curves if you're trying to draw some complex streets. But I wanted to kind of highlight the elevator shape, just to kind of break down exactly how SVG can look and how it can work for you when you're building your own graphics.
So we just wanted to share this with you all to provide an example of the many on-roads that there are for blind designers and enthusiasts. We want design to be not for us, but with us. And that is an ethos that LightHouse and the Mad Lab really exemplify. This is our North Star. Thank you for sharing this space with us, and thank you for getting to know the Mad Lab today. And we are so inspired by the work that happens here, and this is just one of the many fires that Mad Lab and the LightHouse has lit. So thank you, and we'll probably take questions later.
Okay.
Thank you.
Thanks all.
So as we clear the stage area up here, this next segment is going to be led by Naomi Rosenberg. Naomi is the assistant director of the Mad Lab. She is also an excellent designer of tactile graphics and images. She's developed our design standards and processes. And she's going to be talking with all of you and getting all of you on board designing your own tactile maps.
Am I audible? Does it sound okay? Oh, great. Hi, everyone. I'm Naomi. As Greg said, Assistant Director, formerly Senior Designer of the Mad Lab. Thanks so much for coming. Thanks to all of our wonderful presenters. You can hold on to it for now, Chancey. Thanks. So you've heard a lot about tactile maps, why they're important, how to read them, and some about how they're made. And now you will get to make one. You'll get to choose what is important to include on your map and how to represent that information. In designing tactile maps, we use similar methods as one would for visual maps. Maps are made of points or symbols, lines, areas, labels, and contextual information. We use these to represent things in the real world, and we provide a key so that these things have meaning. We design feelable elements with the fingertip in mind. Like Braille, which is scaled for a fingertip to read, we have to make sure that the feature is large enough for a fingertip, but not too large, and has sufficient space from other elements around it. As Greg already said, clutter, and we'll keep saying this, clutter is the enemy of good tactile design. Thanks, Josh. So on the screen, there are 3 images of the same map. On the left is a digital design of what will be tactile. It includes different line types, textures, symbols, and Braille labels. Next is the visual design, including different line types, sometimes with different colors, areas filled with color, symbols, and print labels. And the third image is of the printed map with the tactile and visual components combined. To distinguish one thing from another, we must be sure that they feel significantly different. In visual map design, we rely heavily on color, tones, and grayscale. While color can be substituted with textures or Braille abbreviations, being discernible and memorable are paramount. Cognitive capacity is met at 4 to 5, or around 4 to 5 textures, 4 to 5 symbols, and 4 to 5 line types. So I'm going to talk more about symbols, lines, and areas in a moment, but before that, I want to note that labels are very important. And because Braille is about a 24-point font, we often abbreviate it on maps. And then we include those abbreviations on a key. Including a key to a map is almost always necessary. Keys include all the textures, lines, symbols, and abbreviations that appear on the map. And when I say contextual information, I mean things that to accompany the map to help somebody get more from it. Things like written descriptions, verbal descriptions, north arrow, scale. And in a way, the key is one of your most important pieces of contextual information. Symbols. On the screen, I have a series of symbols that we often use on our maps, including stairs, steps, elevators, escalators, bus stops, circles, arrows, triangles, and squares. These symbols represent individual features or a point of interest. This could be a restroom, a parking area, a picnic area, or a city, really anything that's useful or a focal point in a space. Symbols can be different shapes or sizes, always to the scale of a fingertip, and they may include Braille. Our team uses a standard symbol set, which varies based on how we print the map and the scale of the map. The standardization of our symbols helps our readers know what to expect, adding to that all-important contextual information. My last point on the screen is about tactile discrimination, which means when we choose symbols for a map, we make sure they feel different. On some embossers, a small solid square feels exactly the same as a small solid circle. So we would choose one or the other and just make sure that each instance of it on the map feels the same, can be read the same. So remember, use only 4 to 5 unique symbols on a map. The next is line types. We've got several on the screen, dotted, dashed, solid. They can vary by height, by line, stroke thickness, by their dash gap spacing, or they can be doubled. Lines can represent walls, streets, edges, paths. And don't forget that lead lines are the lines that point to things on a map or on an image. These are also lines. So again, use 4 to 5 maximum lines per map. And I've noticed a few people are taking photos. We'll also make this all public in the future. You can reference it. Happy for you too. And the last is fill or area texture. These are used to represent areas of space that a symbol or a line type wouldn't adequately show. Area textures can be dots, lines, stripes, dashed lines, wavy lines, a grid, or solid. Textures can vary by density, height, size, or orientation. So you can rotate vertical lines versus horizontal lines. There are a lot of options for textures, and it very much depends on how you're producing these things with which tool that will help you decide what texture to use. Again, 4 to 5 unique textures only, please. Last slide is top 5. So I just ran through like probably a 2 days worth of tactile map design in like a few minutes, but so I'm giving you my top 5. We didn't even talk about Braille. Top 5 tactile map design tips: design to the size of a fingertip, ensure the map is clear, uncluttered, uncrowded, show only the most important elements, check that textures, lines, and symbols are distinguishable from each other, and leave sufficient space between elements. So in the center or somewhere on your table, there is an envelope, and it has supplies in it to make your own tactile map. These are pre-printed maps. So before we get fully started, I'm just going to describe a few things. These are pre-printed maps that have swell on them. It's a swell paper. It's treated in such a way that if you draw or print on it with carbon-based ink, that will raise up.
Hang on, everyone.
I have lost control. Hold on, just one moment. So if you can hear me, is that what you did? All right, just a sec. So we've got some pre-printed outlines of San Francisco for you to draw on. There's pens in the envelopes for you to draw on them with. We also have some non-visual design packets. And if you would like one of these, please raise your hand. This is for people. Jerry's got his hand raised. Yep. So we've got a bunch of hands raised. We have both things like adhesive things that can be stuck onto a pre-printed map, or we have sensational blackboards that you can draw. So we've got a few volunteers walking around. Can anyone who wants a sensational blackboard? Any hands for sensational blackboard? And well, I'll call out. And then volunteers are coming around to bring the non-visuals. Also, we've got the other envelopes have like raised foam stickers and textures. What are you looking for? All right, so also in some of these envelopes, there are some samples of the types of lines you might draw. If we don't have enough, some of the sticky type packets can be shared. You help, Greg? We help distribute or share a little bit if needed. Are they? So feel free to draw, and we're still getting things handed out. We've got only a few more minutes of this presentation, but feel free to keep drawing through the next few items. Just pay attention to the program if you would. So our team's gonna walk around and chat with folks. Hi everyone. I just wanted to note that when you're done drawing, maybe in like during the panel, if you put your drawings back in the envelope, if it's a swell paper drawing with the pens, a volunteer will come around and grab these envelopes and bring it back to you, risen up, swelled. If you're drawing with swell paper, we'll have volunteers come around and collect the maps later and raise them up. If you'd like to practice on a swell machine later, during our hands-on Q&A, you can come and see what this machine does and how it works. For now, we're just going to swell the papers for you.
So I just took an interesting question that I thought people might want to hear the answer to. Somebody asked, what is swell paper? So swell paper is what's in these packets that were on the table. It's like a white plastic paper. And at a microscopic level, it's basically full of tiny air bubbles. And any ink that has carbon in it, which is typically black ink, like the pens that are also in the packet, when you draw on that and heat it up, we have the machines to do that, it pops up like popcorn. It swells up, which is why they call it swell paper. And that's how the drawing that you make is going to become a feelable drawing. So if you draw your map of San Francisco, put on there whatever you care, whatever your representation or feelings about San Francisco, put it back in the envelope, and later during the program, some volunteers will come around, collect these things, we'll swell them for you and get them back to you, and you can feel your first tactile artwork.
Hi, everyone. I hope you are not too frustrated drawing and somewhat enjoying drawing. It's Naomi again. I think that we are going to let you keep drawing quietly if you'd like to. Otherwise, you may put your swell paper drawings and we'll go swell them for you. And then we can introduce our next few people, right?
Yes. And so, yeah, just to reiterate, if you do want us to swell your drawings, it is important to place it back in that numbered envelope that is on your table, because otherwise it'll be next to impossible for the volunteers to match any particular map from this room with another individual. But if you put it in the numbered envelope, they'll be able to match an envelope to a table. You'll get it back. Yeah, I think by the volunteers will start coming through in about 5 or 10 minutes to start collecting those drawings. Okay, everybody. So at this point, I'm going to start moving the conversation forward here with our next speaker, who's Mike May. Now, Mike May has been a pioneer in new product development. He was the founder and CEO of Sendero Group, developers of the first accessible GPS. He's been CEO of the Seattle LightHouse, executive director of Envision WIC, and chief evangelist at Good Maps Indoor Navigation. Most currently, Mike consults for the American Printing House. And we've been talking with him, we in the Mad Lab have been speaking with him a lot lately about the Monarch, which is a refreshable tactile graphics and Braille display. And he's here to speak with all of us and tell us about the future of tactile maps in digital form.
All right, thanks, Craig. Well, this goes back a ways with Josh, because when he was working on TMAPs, I was hungrily awaiting the first alpha or beta or something that would just give me access to this tactile information. And that was particularly relevant because I was working on GPS, and the thing that GPS is really good at is that it gives you amazing amounts of detail. I mean, there are 20 million points of interest. And in San Francisco, there's one every 10 feet. And so that's all great. But you need an overview. For that detailed information to make sense, you need to have the big picture. And how do you get the big picture? You don't get it from GPS. Now, one of the things that we all do as blind people is you build mental maps. And you build them even when you have nothing, no digital or tactile. You walk around and you're kind of drawing a map in your head, or you learn to anyway, of what's an intersection shaped like. What does the street sequence look like to my work, or wherever you're going. And indoors, it's the same thing. We're drawing these mental maps. So like with all access technology, it's about the toolbox. And the whole equation is really a matter of picking the best tools to go together. So the idea that you can have tactile maps and an overview and a picture of things makes digital maps so much more powerful, and vice versa. The digital maps are much harder to consume if you don't have the context that they fit into. And so even though those early days with Sendero, we had maps from company called TeleAtlas, TomTom, and before the OpenStreetMaps were good, we managed to get Josh access to those early maps, which are of course important in providing a good TMAP. Is what is the data source. Today, and people have been working on full page Braille displays and digital ways of displaying information for a long time. And it's been hard to commercialize. It's super expensive. We all know how much a one cell or one line Braille display costs. $2, $3, $4, $5, $10,000, depending on the device. So imagine a full page Braille display that's 10 lines high and 32, 40 cells wide. That's a lot of Braille dots, and it's expensive, and how do you maintain it, and all the rest that goes into the hardware. So people have been working on it for years. American Printing House it's had some prototypes over the years, but it's finally being commercialized in the form of the Monarch dynamic tactile display, which is a combination of a project between APH and Humanware. And I've got one in front of me here. And if you put the tactile map that's on your table on top of this, the width would be about the same, but the height is about half a page, because it's 10 lines and a page is usually 25. So it's a much different orientation. So strengths and weaknesses of everything. The benefit of this digital display is you can have thousands, tens of thousands of images that you can import into this display. It's a lot cheaper than printing out Braille. I mean, an academic Braille book can cost $10,000, $20,000, $30,000 to produce. And so you can think about in the future, if you can make that digital and give people access with files that just go into a device like the Monarch, then you have a much more cost-effective way of producing Braille. So this device, which is based on the Humanware long-time Keysoft software, has a lot of things that are just like a Braille note. It has a word processor, and it has some math functions and calendars and internet and all the rest of that. The thing that's unique to it is that it can display maps and display pictures. And the pictures would be anything you can imagine. It's the same concept we talked about with maps, where if you have too much clutter, you can't really tell what it is. And I've got a lot of the tactile graphic image library is on here with many different images. And later on, if you want to come look in that library and see what you can find, that would be great. I was on Thursday night, I had the great pleasure of hanging out with Stevie Wonder and showing him this device. And I showed an image, and we all know as blind people, one of the things we hate was a sighted person who comes up to you and says, "What is this?" And you know it's going to go badly, because you can't tell what it is. If you don't have a cognitive concept of what something is, even if you feel it, it doesn't really register. I mean, that's why Braille labels are so important. If I looked at this map in front of me and said, well, where is this? I wouldn't know until I felt, oh, it says GRV here. Down below that, it says DRT. And then HYS, Hayes, I guess. I don't know what DRT is, but it's between Hayes and Grove. Anyway, those symbols make this map make sense. And with pictures and with images, you don't always have a way of doing that. I love, the tactile graphics tablets, where you have all this tactile information, and you can press on a spot, and it has an audio tag of wherever you're pressing, it announces what's there. And because Braille, you can't write all this stuff out in Braille, it takes up too much space. But audio labels, you can. So I violated the rule of don't ask me what this is with Stevie, and I put this in front of him, and I said, tell me what you think of this. And he looks at it and he says, that's the album cover of Songs in the Key of Life. Because he had it in his head. He knew what it looked like, so it made sense to him. When I first saw that, I didn't have any idea what it was. It could have been a muffin from a bakery shop or something. I had no idea, but he knew, and that was really great. I went through the rest of his album covers and showed it images of these things. What I'd really love, and this is, these are the kind of features that are going to be added to tactile displays in the future. I would love to be able to go onto that album cover and say, I wonder what this little bit is about, and push down on it and have an audio label. Say that's Stevie Wonder's face, or that's a cloud, or whatever it is. I want labels on that stuff so they'll be meaningful. Once I hear that, then all of a sudden his album cover is going to take on a whole new dimension in my head. I'm going to be able to picture it and take it with me, because the best place for images is in our heads. You can take them everywhere. They're very convenient, and they're meaningful because you can put them in context, and you can only do that by finding ways of importing that information, whether it's digitally or tactily or both. One of the other things that's pretty cool with a display like this is being able to draw and feel on it in real time. So APH is developing an app that's called Wing It. And the reason it's called Wing It is because when the developers ask teachers, how do you create stuff for blind kids? And they say, we just wing it. They use whatever, wiki sticks, glue, whatever they have, they just wing it to do that. So this app is called Wing It, and you're going to be able to take a tablet or a phone and draw on that surface, on that screen, and whatever you draw on that screen is going to be represented on this tactile display. So you think of something really as simple as somebody that says, I'm in this room, where's the restroom? And somebody can say, you are here, the restroom is there. And they can just make a little circle or whatever image they want to make on the tablet, and you can feel it. Now you have that beautiful mental image in your brain between those two things, so you can orient yourself. I mean, what an amazing different way to perceive the world using all of these tools. And these are not, all 20 years off. These are things that are already happening and that will be happening in the next couple of years. Yeah. 4:17 p.m. All right, 4:17. So I have a couple minutes for questions. And by the way, this has speech and Braille and tactile output and a regular Braille keyboard. Yeah, Obi. Price point is $18,000.
And if you have a question, raise your hand or clap, and I will come find you with a microphone.
Yeah, these are being focused on kids in schools, and of course having one in each school, one at each college. And the American Printing House has just gotten a commitment from the Senate to add $10 million a year in appropriations to fund this monarch in next year. Now it has to pass Congress, but it's a big step if it already got through the Senate. So everybody will be lobbying to get that funding, because obviously that kind of price point makes us very prohibitive. I'm really surprised to hear already, though, about people that are buying this, not just in schools, but from a lot of different standpoints, because people realize this device is really going to be valuable and will be worthwhile.
The libraries are already buying them, correct?
Sorry?
Libraries?
Yes.
Some will. Some progressive ones.
Hmm? We got a question in the front.
Just this is Kevin. Had a question. Does it work with different screen readers as far as showing what are graphics in focus? Or I guess, and the second question is, can it work with as like a design tool to view, kind of draft out designs, wireframes?
Kevin, this is, of course, this device is running Android, the humanware system. So it's not a matter of screen readers. The idea is that the tablet that would be able to do the Wing It app, that would obviously be running with voiceover, and the intention is to make that as accessible as possible. I mean, another important thing, of course, for schools are graphs, and being able to import those. The SVGs are not yet compatible, but this is on our drawing board, and we've been talking to various people, Josh included, about how do we make that work better? How do we have a more automatic system for getting a TMAP displayed in the right way? Because it's different resolution on the Monarch. So right now, I've got to do some zooming and arrow up and zoom up and page up and down in order to find my way around the map. And we want to make that more seamless. So the idea is at some point you could go on to the TMAP site, download your tactile map for an embosser, or download it for the Monarch. Anybody else?
Jerry, I have a comment.
Yeah, Jerry, I guess.
Just want to point out that in 1984, 40 years ago, 80-cell braille displays were $18,000 in 1984 dollars. I expect the cost of the Monarch within 5 years will be somewhat under $10,000. We don't have to wait. We can push it. The Congress is funding educational opportunities. Maybe it'll come down sooner.
All right, and there's a man who'd know. Yeah. One more question.
Hi, Mike. This is Mina. I think when we use the Monarch, one of the problem is there is limited choice for zoom. So they're either very, very small or very, very large.
Yeah, there's two levels. That's it. The overview and then the zoomed view. Right.
Okay, they could either
they want to scale that. So
yeah. Because like for map reading, sometimes the large, the small zoom is too small, and then the large one is too large.
Yeah, one nice thing is that you can place your finger at a certain place on the map, and then you tap this one button, and it zooms in on that spot. So you can point the zoom to some extent, but there's a lot of work in progress to make it more scalable, because as I said, with the maps, right now, I'm just looking at a portion of the map on the Monarch, and I have to zoom out, and then I get the big picture, but then I'm not seeing the Braille display. So it's there's a lot of catch-22. All right, well, thank you very much. If anybody wants to feel this thing, I'll be around. Absolutely.
Thank you so much. Thank you so much, Mike. So our next and final segment is that we have a panel discussion planned here. You've already met Josh. You've already met Chancey. Perhaps most of you have not yet met Ting Siu, Dr. Ting Siu. She's a teacher of blind and low vision students, also known as a TVI, and she coordinates the Northwest Center for Assistive Technology Training at the Washington State School for the Blind. And her mission is to advance teachers' proficiency with access technology, promote innovations in multimedia accessibility, and motivate a new generation of techie TVIs. So let's invite the
on.
Anybody still has a swell map that needs to be sent through the machine, let us know, because we're probably going to wrap that up pretty quick. That's true. You can also hold on to it, and we can do it after the presentation.
Hey, Greg. Yeah. Can you give us a heads up when it's 1:45? Is that, and we can go to questions at that time?
Sure, it's 21 minutes.
Is that about right?
Right now, it's just about 20 after 22 after.
Maybe.
Yes, I will. I'll give you
Okay.
a heads up about what, 15 minutes, 20 minutes?
Okay. Yeah. So are you going to start?
Okay. Hi, everybody. Hi. Sorry, I need to stand. I can't sit. Thank you all for staying and not leaving yet. We're almost there at the end, so hopefully we can
This
just.
is going to be the most exciting part.
I don't know. I don't know if I could promise that, but we'll try. I am very honored to be here on this panel. I just find myself kind of with these people who really know and have a lot of experience. So as somebody who is sighted and an educator in the space, I feel like a lot of my job is to highlight and amplify the things that blind people are developing from the community, to encourage our sighted teachers to connect their blind and low vision students with people who have a lived experience of blindness and or have low vision. And I recognize that my expertise is in helping to translate some of these tools and strategies to the education space and help parents be better advocates too. So we are gonna just kind of pop quiz each other. Josh, Chancey, and I, we've all known each other for many years, for a very long time. We're good friends, so that might shine in this discussion. So we're not gonna be too formal about things. And I'm gonna just dive right in and let's get this conversation started. I have a question for Chancey. So actually, before I ask Chancey the question, how many of you guys have heard the term image poverty in the space of tactile graphics, tactile media? Yeah? Oh, wow. Well, I don't know if you guys.
That was just Marco with 5 hands.
So Chancey is actually the person who coined the term image poverty. And so you might hear this term actually perpetuated in various conversations and presentations about tactile media making and just tactile graphics in general. But Chancey, it's a pretty spicy term, image poverty. It brings up strong feelings. So can you quickly describe what you mean by this term and what do you want people to take away from this term when they hear it?
So when I hear, am I mic? I think I might. Yeah. Oh, it's so subtle from up here. So when I hear that loaded word poverty applied to other areas of life, it's usually because there's something that you're missing that impacts every area of your life.
I'm going to turn your mic real quick, okay?
Oh, thank you. Okay.
Okay, sorry. We're friendly here.
We are now.
Okay.
So I think of it as image poverty because when images are missing from your life, it really impacts every area of your life, whether that's work, whether that's getting around, whether that's art appreciation. And so I use that term image poverty because when images are missing to the degree that they're missing in most of the lives of blind people, it really has an impact that can be felt throughout the spheres of your life, even though you may not notice what's missing until it's not missing anymore. And it is stark, it feels stark. And so it's intentionally a phrase that gets people's attention. And the opposite of image poverty is image richness and image enrichment. And that's the kind of thing that the Mad Lab does.
So I'm just, when you talk about it, it really makes me think about a lot of the work that we all do. When Greg introduced us, he talked about information accessibility, and I work in a lot of different areas. We all work across a lot of different domains, but the common factor is access to information, which is the key thing that blind and visually impaired people really face as a barrier. And so image poverty, I think, as you've framed it, I think is a way of saying we as blind people need better access. And again, I think you don't mean image as a visual thing. I think you mean image as a a mechanism for spatial representation, right? For representing information, whether it's a representation of a photograph or a representation of a scatter plot, right? And these are the things that we as blind people have been told by the researchers I mentioned earlier. Oh, you don't need that. But in fact, we do. And I think that the breadth of, from maps to graphs to photographs to the work that you do supporting blind people in their journey to do their own drawing is all part of this amazing sort of realization that it's not just about access to text. Like, that's great, but we need access to much more because of the richness of what is usually visual, but is often to us spatial information that gets represented tactily.
And I mean, I think even just when you talk about access is actually the bare minimum. With what Chancey is doing at the Dimensions Lab and getting blind people the tools and skills and mindset to also be designers and creators, it's about giving equitable engagement with information and also the ability to create and be seen as producers of information. And I think that is ultimately what we need for our students, and to be seen as like equal members of their classroom communities. And then that allows them to then have leadership that carries forward into adulthood.
So when folks come to the idea of tactile graphics, it often comes as a surprise. It seems very novel, but in fact, tactile graphics has been around in different forms for decades, if not longer. And so I have a question for Josh, which is, I wonder if you can talk a little bit about how access to tactile maps and materials has evolved over the years.
Yeah, I mean, it's gotten so much better. I felt I wasn't alone, but I felt like I was alone early on in my work with tactile maps and tactile graphics. I was a super privileged blind kid growing up in New York, in the public schools, which are super well resourced, or were at the time. And I studied. Not only did I have Braille for everything I needed, but I had graphics for my biology, my chemistry, my geometry, my calculus. Like, I had everything I needed. And I was really lucky to have that kind of a rich graphical spatial environment. Not everybody does. So when I sort of started working on making maps more available to everybody, it was tough. And I think that now people are recognizing the value of maps and the value of graphics. It's gotten so much better, but there's still a lot to do. It's still very labor intensive to make good tactile graphics. It's not a matter of turning a visual image into something you can touch. All of those design considerations that Naomi led us through as in her speed date of tactile design, those are really hard, and we don't have reliable automated processes at all to do those things. So every tactile graphic is a labor of love, pretty much, except for most TMAP. So that's what I was pushing on. I think we're getting there, and I think we've got a long way to go. And that's one of the reasons why supporting the Mad Lab and the work that they do, and the exciting progress with the Monarch. These are all signs of progress, and it's not for us to say, oh, it's getting done, let's take our foot off the gas. It's for us to say, press harder, keep going. I want to, so Ting, you have done a lot of teaching. You've got amazing experience with a huge, not only with lots of different kinds, lots of different young blind kids and deafblind, but also you've taught a lot of TVIs how to teach and sort of supported the next generation of teachers of the visually impaired. With Chancey's question about how things have changed, how do you think, first of all, how are tactile graphics impacting young students when they're available or when they're not available? And how are TVIs making better or learning to make use of these tools or not?
Whoa, loaded questions. I think in the education space, this is where the whole concept of image poverty really becomes apparent. I think all too often, at best, kids really only see tactile graphics when it's in a map form or in a math class. But they don't get the pervasive experience with graphics that most students get. So you think about even little kids, browsing through little picture books and how much you learn just from looking at pictures and how that informs your literacy development. Our blind students aren't getting that. And so these early experiences with pictures and graphics and just developing the spatial concepts are missing. What I'm seeing in schools is, there's still, and my bias is in teacher prep. I used to coordinate the graduate teaching program in visual impairments at San Francisco State. I'm seeing that in teacher prep. There's still a long ways to go in making sure teachers are graduating from their preparation programs, knowing all the different ways to make tactile graphics, and not just for maps and math, but just in general. And it's also not just about having the pictures available when the other kids get pictures in their books, but it's making sure that our blind students have also the same sort of experiences sketching and doodling and scribbling, and making those connections for themselves and all the learning that comes from making your own graphics and your own pictures. I think we're getting there. What Chancey's doing in the Dimensions Lab, I'm going to ask a question there to learn more, but I think we can take a lot of notes from what you're doing, Chancey, at the Dimensions Lab to learn these specific tools and strategies for teaching parents and educators, and just anybody in a school. It could be art teachers, librarians, museum educators. How do we need to differentiate this instruction when we have a blind student in the classroom? What other tools are available to make sure blind kids are being able to create and have creative expression like all the other kids do? I coordinate the Center for Assistive Technology Training now. And so with that, we're able to produce and develop training resources to help with this. For anybody who wants to get started on, how do I get blind kids doodling? There is an online curriculum right now that's been developed. It's free, it's online. It's 10 activities that are very specific to how do you get blind kids drawing. You can find it at TADA, which stands for Tangible Art and Design Adventures. So it's tada.wssb.wa.gov. So this is a curriculum we've tried to bottle up, and it's really based on what Chancey's done at the Dimensions Lab. So I would love it if, Chancey, could you share a little bit more about, your tactile art and drawing workshops that you're doing at the Dimensions and how this is addressing the image poverty issue?
So when I was growing up, it was as though tactile graphics just arrived by a fairy, a sighted fairy would drop tactile graphics in my lap. And so I didn't think of myself as someone who might create tactile graphics. And when I meet library patrons, they often say, oh yeah, there was an embosser in my school. There was a swell form machine in my school, but I wasn't allowed to touch it. And another thing I hear from teachers and families and librarians is, we're really interested in tactile graphics. We want to do it. We agree that it's important, but we don't think we can afford it. And so we do two things at the Dimensions Lab that I think are important to propagate. One of them is that we get all of that equipment into a place where the public can interact with it, that anyone blind or sighted can. And when we make procurement and purchasing decisions, we choose what's most accessible. Is it always perfectly accessible? Maybe not. But we make decisions that are based on the accessibility of the equipment because we want everybody to be able to fully engage. And we recognize that this is expensive equipment and equipment that requires a certain level of acquired expertise. And so we centralize it in a lab, and that lab is open to any member of the public. The other thing I think that we do that's important is create a safe and brave space where people of all ages, kids, adults, blind, sighted, can start from zero or from somewhere else when it comes to learning how to do tactile drawing. And we really emphasize the fact that anybody at any budget can engage with tactile graphics by making and investing time in learning to interpret and become critical of even tactile drawings. We use that sensational blackboard, which is a $50 plastic and rubber tablet. You can get it at sensationalbooks.com. If you can't afford $50, you can get a silicone placemat at like Walmart or something, and it'll be about $3. And that's it. That's all. You can get started. And so the movement really is for everyone. Images are for everyone. We don't live in a text-only world. And I think one of the most effective levers we can pull is spreading that message, because if you can spread the excitement and you can spread the proficiency and prove that precise, concise communication can happen with tactile graphics, people will find a way to figure out the budgetary things, but the motivation has to be there first.
I'm just going to jump in and invite us to sort of circle back to the Mad Lab and tactile maps. And I want to tell a little story about the pandemic. We were all sort of hunkered down in our little bunkers, and Naomi was like, what can I do to sort of start bringing like some tactile joy to people's lives? And she put out a call like, what tactiles do you want? And I was, in order to make myself less depressed, rereading Lord of the Rings from my childhood. And I realized I had always wanted a tactile map of Middle Earth. And I reached out to Naomi. I said, could I have a tactile map of Middle Earth? And she was like, she kind of said, what's that? And then she and I started sort of doing this co-design thing where we would iterate together. She would send me files, I would print them out. And it's just, so maps are not just, I said earlier sort of disparagingly about this United States or the globe maps. Those are lovely too and wonderful. And tactiles bring all kinds of information, but not just in themselves, but supplemental to the rest of our lives. The LightHouse did this great work on a project called Touching the News, where they would produce a weekly tactile graphic that was related to current events. So maybe maybe a map of the ship that got stuck in the Suez Canal a while back, or some other graphics. And these are all sort of supporting not just the simplicity of getting from one place to another or learning your neighborhood, but building the image wealth of the things that everybody, all the sighted people, are seeing in the newspaper. I also, by the way, I'm just finishing the Wizard of Earthsea series. We need a map of Earthsea next. So yeah. Yeah, go ahead.
Over at the library, we are starting to teach folks about Swift Playgrounds, which is a coding education offering from Apple. And Mad Lab was instrumental in creating tactile representations of these puzzle worlds. And that's an opportunity for lots and lots of blind kids to find out what it is to be a spatial thinker and to engage in spatial reasoning. And that kind of work, those kinds of partnerships with companies, can really power encounters with tactile graphics at scale that can get a kid inspired and excited. And those kinds of encounters can really propel a lifetime of image literacy, spatial literacy. So I think one of the coolest things that the Mad Lab does is these collaborations, the BART maps being another example of them that really touch a lot of people.
You know, another thing I really appreciate just being in the education space and seeing how much teachers and parents struggle with getting the tools they need is spaces like the Mad Lab, community spaces like the Dimensions, like the tools are there, you know, the technology is there, the expertise is there. So even if there's a teacher who doesn't really know how to get started or how to produce the stuff, there's resources there. You know, if there are people who don't know how to design a tactile graphic, there's resources like Be Tactile, which is a tactile graphics repository where you can search for files that have been created for tactile graphic creation. So there's a lot of different ways, that are becoming. I hope, hopefully there's, getting more momentum here, where if you don't have the tools or if you don't have the expertise, there's other people who have it, and you can kind of cobble it together.
So a question that I have for both of you is, as we look into the future, what are you hoping to see in the next 5 years or so in terms of increasing and broadening the blind public's access to tactile graphics?
I'm going to go first.
Sure.
I think one of the things that you, Chancey, are sort of a seed crystal for, and I think we all are, is building community. We don't have an annual conference on tactile graphics. We don't have it, and there isn't a professional society of tactile graphics. There's no presentations at the International Cartographic Conference on tactile maps. There's no community of people who are in constant touch with each other. There's no community of there are informal communities of practice around tactile maps and tactile graphics, but they're fragmented, and we need more leadership. I would love to see it happen, and I think we will see it happen in the next 5 years. And I'll just say that the LightHouse has been a leader in this for years. We created we ran a tactile arts and graphics conference at Enchanted Hills Camp a number of years ago. It was amazing, but it was a one-off. It was not. We didn't do it again. And also the Mad Lab creates a community around it, like Chancey and the work she's doing at Dimensions, like Ting and the work she does at Northwest Center CAT, and of course, many others. And before I hand it to Ting to respond, one thing that I wanted to say, Mike May, who spoke right before us, I want to say, speaking of community, Mike and Jerry and many others have been supporters of tactile graphics and tactile literacy and the TMAP work in specific from the very beginning. This is not just a group of people that happened to get together today. This is a group of people that have been working together on tactile graphics and tactile literacy for decades. And there's one person who came down from Oregon who I want to recognize. John, are you in here? Yeah. John?
Yeah, John.
John Gardner. John Gardner is responsible for the creation of the embossers that create almost all of the high quality tactile graphics that I use and that many of us use. Swell paper is awesome. There are lots of ways to create tactiles, but the embossed graphics that you've been handling today were created by a technology that John perfected with his team. And it is, when I was building TMAP, John recognized the value of the work that we were doing and was incredibly supportive. And I just want to say thanks to John and to View Plus for all of your help and support in tactile graphics over the years. Thank you. I just really didn't want to forget to say that.
That's good. That's
yeah.
Great.
Let's bring you a microphone.
Okay.
It's question o'clock.
All right.
Hi. Thanks for the compliment, Josh. I appreciate it. I just wanted to reaffirm something that Josh said about lack of interest in tactile graphics back in the olden days. Back in the 1990s, when we were developing something that we were calling the Tiger technology at the time, I showed some prototype examples to many, many blind people and many, many TVIs. About 98% of the blind people who saw them just said, "This is fantastic, this is great, we need more maps." About 98% of the TVIs who saw them said, "You're going to start a company on this, you're going to go broke." Blind people, listen, blind people don't know how to read tactile graphics, which unfortunately was true and unfortunately still is largely true. And we need to do something about that. And they also said blind people don't need tactile graphics. And I knew damn well that was wrong. So I guess I was stupid. We started the company. And there have been many times when I thought they were really right. But I guess my comment is that it's so much fun to be sitting here in this meeting today, hearing so many people who are doing innovative things, and Josh and Chancey are certainly at the top of that, along with the Mad Lab, talking about tactile graphics and talking about the future. I think we are developing community. I think we are aiming toward a better place. And it's largely the people in this room today who are responsible for that. And I'm so glad to be here. Thanks, all of you.
Thank you, John.
Jerry Kuns here, and I want to say I've been talking about the language of lines for so many years. This community needs to grow. This community needs to coalesce. I hope the Mad Lab, in its effort to market all of the different things they do, that even though I'm so involved about and with them, I don't know so many things about. We need to market, but talking about the development of training of the language of lines and getting infants and young people's fingers on diagrams and images is essential to our integration into society. I look forward to being a part of that group with the rest of my life.
So I think that's a great transition. It's a great transition to finish up by, I want to hand it back to Ting to respond to Chancey's question, which I think Jerry sort of gave you a great opening there. But, and then we're going to move to some questions.
Well,
try again.
Okay, I just did the off and on thing. Hopefully that works. Okay, I'll just give a very short response. I think the gist of things have been said already, but in 5 years, I hope that there will be pervasive access to information in all of our community spaces. So not just specialized spaces like the Lighthouse, but I want our libraries to have stuff like embossers and make tactile graphics, and kids should come, like families should be able to go to the library, and there's access for everybody in a family. Museums, same thing, like museum exhibits, all these different community spaces. I think there's a lot of potential to just have that community engagement on the broadest level. A lot of maker spaces. They should all have equipment for embossing and making tactile graphics and models and all that stuff. So yeah.
Thank you, Ting.
Mm-hmm.
So I think we want to make sure that there's time for questions. We're going to try to do a hands-on. You can check out the Monarch. You can check out your swelled swell form paper. You can take a tour maybe of the Mad Lab and the tools they use down there. And I just, before we go to questions, because I think it'll be a little chaotic at the end, I just want to say, again, thank you to everybody for coming today. This is, I am kind of hoping this will be the seed of a practice, that we will begin to have more regular meetings, more regular events that highlight the importance of tactile graphics, the work that the Mad Lab is doing, and the community building that we have started here today. So thank you very much to Greg and to Naomi and to the LightHouse staff, all of them. Greg probably, I'm hoping Greg will read out some names later, but I want to thank everybody, and I want to thank you all for coming. Donate your time to the projects that Greg has talked about. There are open source opportunities that Naomi was talking about, or somebody was talking. Sorry. The idea of contributing to the open source project that is TMAP is amazing, but there are lots of other projects to work on, and being guided by this community is so important. There's lots of work to be done, but don't just run off and do it. Find out what needs to be done before you do anything, okay? Talk to us. If you've noticed, there have been a lot of blind people speaking today, and that is unusual. That is, you know, you can find lots of blindness agencies that will trot out blind people to sort of give testimonials, but you will not find a lot of blindness agencies who are with blind people in positions of leadership and who are speaking from a position of knowledge and power. And that is an amazing thing that the LightHouse has. And we can help you understand what needs there are. If you want to work on a project, let us know. Let the LightHouse know. Let the Mad Lab know. We can guide you. We can give you information about where the gaps are, what needs work. And we want to stay in touch. So there's a newsletter, there's a mailing list that you should definitely sign up for. Greg can tell you, but let's keep this going. And I want to just say thank you again for coming today. And we'll go to questions now.
Okay, I got one.
I'm gonna go with Hobie first because he was trying to squeeze in.
He was.
Half an hour ago.
He was. You've been very patient.
Giving you a mic. You're giving a mic.
You got it.
Great presentation, everybody. Really beautiful talks. So much knowledge and so much that we can think through and learn. My question for these three esteemed panelists really relates to the coming of age of AI. And I would consider
Hey,
myself.
what is that? I haven't heard about that.
Along with Josh, I'd consider myself a privileged blind kid when it comes to education. Had a lot of resources out there and a lot of tools, but really, I've had the opportunity to chat with some very young blind folks, 8, 10, 12 years old, who have had stuff explained to them in audio so much or verbally explained to them in person. And it's because there's so much advancement in new ways of learning, new ways of teaching. I'll just leave it at AI. And how do we think this is going to affect the ability of folks in school and beyond to really dig in and understand things from a spatial perspective? None of us want tactile graphics to go away. Do you think AI threatens that?
I don't think that it's a threat at all. Let's be mindful that there are thousands and thousands of years of visual images available on which to train AI. And there is a much smaller corpus of tactile graphics. It is a little soon for us to be handing the keys to AI where tactile graphics are concerned. It is more important now than ever to get humans engaged with creating tactile graphics, because to be frank, we need a lot more high quality tactile graphics before we can even think about training AI to be reliable on them. What I am super excited about is using natural language AI for things like a coding partner that can remind you about syntax, correct your syntax, maybe explain something about a quote unquote visual font or the convention that might be used around a compass rose, and be a whisper in your ear to fill in some knowledge gaps so that you don't have to go bother a person for every little question you have. On an average day when I'm working with graphics, I have at least dozens. And so I think we can use AI in a way that is measured, mindful, granular, and keeps the control with us, the people who are the ones that need and want and can best inform the creation of these graphics.
Jerry was, let's see, who when Mike was talking about audio tactile graphics, the ability to touch a tactile graphic and get more information about the thing at that point. I think that's going to be a really interesting opportunity for image processing and AI. Right now, all of those images that would need to be, you know, when we did the BART station maps, right, with audio tactile techniques, the BART station maps have all these symbols. You know, they've got symbols for the fare gates, for the station agent booth, for the stairs, for the escalators. And as we've said several times, clutter is the enemy. So the less labeling you in Braille you have to put on a tactile graphic, the more space you have for clarity and for graphics. So audio tactile graphics are a real, a fabulous tool. It would be awesome if we didn't have to label every single thing on the image, on the tactile image. If we could use machine learning to respond to questions about the image. That, you know, where does this staircase lead? Does this elevator go up or down? You know, what are the hours for this station agent booth? Things like that. So I think there's I agree with Chancey. Tactile graphics will only be made better by AI if we use it appropriately. If we use it inappropriately, it will produce a huge quantity of shitty tactile graphics.
If anybody heard about Gemini recommending glue to hold the cheese on your pizza, we don't want the tactile graphic equivalent of that.
Oh, we have a question up front here.
Hi, I'm Mina here. I have a comment or like a continuation of what Jerry and everyone else is talking about. I think we have this cycle of, you know, the kind of blind people doesn't need or read tactile graphics, but you know, in reality we do. And then I think how does that circle complete? And I think the missing piece is educators, like TVIs and O&Ms. And then I know most, you know, ORBO play a significant role in training, you know, professionals, TVIs and O&Ms. But as a parent of a blind child, I have encountered like almost half of the TVIs and O&M who openly acknowledge they do not know how to produce tactile graphics. So I feel that's like a real significant problem. And then to address it, you know, systemically, I imagine there has to be required hardcore curriculum. They cannot get a degree without knowing how those tools and, you know, make tactile graphics not a luxury, but an essential and part of the education and starting from a blind child. And then that's the only pathway to produce, you know, kind of lead to blind adult who really utilize this information. For me, like from my perspective, how are those tools available? And then if we are savvy enough, we can navigate those. But you know, how can those be, you know, fully integrated into everyday learning? That's still a challenge for me.
Thanks, Mina. Ting, you want to?
Yeah, I mean, this kept me up at nights when I coordinated the teacher prep program. It's a problem. It continues to be. You know, I ran what I thought was a really effective teacher prep program, yet I still had graduates who came out and can support the tactile graphic needs of an academic student. So, you know, there's pre-service training. Right now, I'm kind of in more professional development. I think we just need to make the professional development also just supportive of TVIs. So, you know, supporting the TVIs communities of practice. You know, what the Center for Assistive Technology training program is doing is making sure TVIs have access to the technology that they need to learn in order to teach the kids, including embossers and braille displays and the Monarch. So I think we have a long way to go to get the personnel and education up to speed. I acknowledge and I agree with you, it's a huge, huge issue. I don't think there's a single solution. And I also think we just have to, you know, step on the gas and go even harder at addressing the problem. There are a lot of people working in this space to get the personnel up to speed. I think it's always going to be a remediation issue because there's always going to need help and professional development. And this is where having these communities of practice available is so essential. You know, a lot of my work personally is to make sure every TVI is engaged with multiple communities of practice that include blind people and blind designers and really understand what the stakes are when access is not there. Yeah, Jess.
Sure. Let me bring you a mic.
Hi, Jessica McDowell. As a TVI, I have reached out to APH. So just because of the people who are in this room, APH has declined to allow us like a swell machine and swell paper to be on quota. And I think we've seen here, this is one really quick way to be able to just make a graphic really quick and to also have our students make their own graphics and, you know, work the swell machine themselves. But it's without having, there's not a revenue stream that's easy in the schools to buy the machine and to keep getting the paper. I have the luxury of saying to the secretary, 2 months later, we need another $100 box of paper. But APH would be a great source if teachers in the schools that are using quota funds had swell machines and access to paper, just like we get our Braille paper and Braillers from them. That would be a game changer.
Yeah, I agree. It was a game changer that embossers are now available on quota and better available. We just have to get more stuff available. Yeah, I totally agree.
And I think that what we said about teacher prep, what Mina was getting at about teachers knowing how to do tactile graphics, it's my hope that that by building a large and more formalized community of practice around tactile graphics practitioners, tactile graphics creators, designers, and consumers, that we can bring some kind of influence on teacher prep programs to require them to include tactile graphics creation and training in their curriculum, which I think would help a lot.
It actually already is required. So just to confirm that it is required.
They just don't do it.
They just don't do it. It's in our state credentialing standards that all TVIs have to know how to produce accessible multimedia, including text, images, and videos.
Maybe we need to.
I mean, I wrote that myself in the standards. You know, it's in there.
Maybe we need to create a standardized test so that.
No, don't even go there. Don't even go there. But TVIs need help. Schools need help. So yeah, that's what. Yeah.
Other questions?
Oh, I see one over here in the front row. Yeah, here we go.
Hi, sorry if this question is out of scope. I'm a low vision software engineer. Would it be possible, do you think, to use like the native accelerometer API on my iPhone to make my iPhone into a wearable embodied mapping device where I could just turn it on and then it could like encode a representation of the three-dimensional space I'm in?
It wouldn't encode a representation of the space you were in, but you could create a sort of breadcrumb track of where you had been.
Okay.
And superimpose that on a map that you would get from OpenStreetMap or something like that.
Because I mostly want it for like buildings, because I feel like buildings are really confusing,
Yeah.
the insides of them.
So building maps are a whole other interesting area that we may not have time to plow into, and I'll just The yeah,
We'll put a pin in that for the next event, right?
yeah, and I mean, I started with street maps because that's where the data was, right? We don't have the data for building internal building floor plans reliably yet. There are some in OpenStreetMap, there's some in Apple Maps, there's some in Google Maps, but it's until we have a mechanism for really gathering that data, we can't create a standardized or reliable mechanism for representing that data, whether it's tactile or otherwise.
Brian Bro. So I have probably more, I have a more technical question, but can you, two comments. One, I think I have some ideas on how to address the issue you talked about of getting to the data that's not going to be on the map. We can talk about that offline. But my other question is, can you talk a little bit, I did a little playing with the TMAP's website last night and generated some maps. And what I noticed was that it seemed to know the addresses that I put in, but then it made some comment about not being able to know where my address was precisely. And so it occurred to me that I didn't quite understand the relationship between Google Maps and OpenStreetMaps. I know there's a difference, but can you elaborate on when we're talking to one and when we're talking to the other in the website?
Naomi? Or Greg?
Hi, it's Naomi. Google is recognizing this is just the search engine, and it's saying, here's my address, and then Google tells the results of that to OpenStreetMap. So I don't know if there was an issue with your address, it's probably on Google's side.
So OpenStreetMaps is it hosted by Google?
No.
Okay. So yeah,
OpenStreetMap is an open source repository and data set. We use Google for what's called geocoding. So when you want to turn an address or a name of something into a latitude longitude, that's called geocoding. And so we use Google for that, and then we hand off the latitude longitude to OpenStreetMap to gather the map data around that point.
okay. So what I'm seeing is so Google finds the location, does the geocoding, then hands it to OpenStreetMaps, and OpenStreetMaps may or may not be able to translate that back into an address.
We should check out your address later and figure out where is the issue, and we'll let you know.
We'll get you professional help.
Another question over here.
Hi, Michelle Quach here. I am a PhD student at the University of Santa Cruz. I am fully sighted, and I actually haven't been in the accessibility field ahead of time. This is actually my first event.
Welcome.
Yeah, thank you guys. I want to say thank you to all of you for, allowing me to be here and just listen to what is going on within the field and stuff like that. But I actually wanted to do a little shameless plug and say that we are working on getting indoor maps fully accessible for everyone, not only with tactile maps, but also with wayfinding. Of course, there's a bunch of wayfinding apps, but we're working with Apple's IMDF, which is indoor mapping data format. They're going to be able to use Apple Maps to tell you where to go indoors. And I know this was an issue that someone brought up earlier about just trying to navigate and seeing everyone here as well, trying to navigate as well. It is very eye-opening for me. And hopefully I can kind of give you guys a solution to be able to navigate on the indoors.
Are you working in geography, or what
I come from a computer science background, so I am a part of the computer vision lab at Santa Cruz under Roberto Manduki. Some of you might be familiar with him. He is very, very popular within this field. I'm very honored to be a part of the field as well. But yeah, like I said, I hope to be able to give you all that. I would love to show some people some of my drafts if you all would like. It is terrible though, and that's why I haven't showed it to anyone yet. But if you're more interested in it, feel free to read some papers on SIM. So that's SIM. And yeah.
So thanks for plugging that. And I'll just say great that you're here, great that you're connecting with us. And the thing that I said earlier about using this community as a sounding board and to learn about what the needs are before you dive too deep into what you're building, I want to encourage you to take that to heart. Roberto and I have had many, many conversations about that. We are a community that is here to help you know what the actual needs are. Please connect with us and learn from us.
Definitely. Thank you guys so much.
Other questions? We're about to wrap up, I think.
Oh, wait.
Okay.
Hi, it's Naomi. While Ben is walking the mic over there, I want to remind everyone that we have a hands-on Q&A after Greg talks, so you'll have an opportunity to continue these conversations one-on-one.
Hi.
After Greg talks.
Hi, thank you so much for hosting this. This is amazing. As a sighted designer, it's an amazing opportunity to be here. And I was just thinking about like the common problem with maps is kind of like a semantic zoom issue. And when you have a printed piece of paper, you always have a fixed kind of instead of a screen, right? You can't rely on a screen. You're relying on a fixed piece of paper. So I always reminded of the fact that like the map is not the territory, right? We have to choose our abstractions. Really interesting topic there. That's obviously too big for this, but I just think that when you think about that semantic zoom issue and like how do you handle that on a printed piece of paper, I'm just curious about that. I think more than anything, just that is to me that seems like because screens handle that really well. Paper does not.
You want to talk about that, Chancey?
So we're not forever tied to hard copy paper as a medium. You've heard about the Monarch today, and there are potentially other graphics tablets that are emerging. You're quite right that hard copy has inherent limitations, and it'll be interesting to see where the future takes us in terms of more zoom capable tactile graphics. But what I can leave you with about it is knowing what you know about the fixity and limitations of hard copy and the decreased resolution that's necessary for legible tactile graphics and the importance of avoiding clutter, really focusing on the purpose of the map and what the map intends to communicate and what goals it's helping an individual address will guide the semantic and representative choices that you make.
Hello. Oh, Dan Gardner. By the way, while I'm walking this mic across the room, it is 5:15. The bartender works for 15 more minutes. There is a ton of food out there. There's so much food, I doubt anyone remembered to bring Tupperware to this party. But
so I think Dan is going to be our last question.
Yeah, I guess we've kind of run into it, but I just wanted to see if you've thought about it anymore between like touching the news, TMAPs. We keep running into the problem, right? Of we can do digital distribution, except there's no one at the other end, right? So I'm just wondering, again, we heard about, $10 million from Congress for, I did the quick math, was 550 monarchs. If you were to have an embosser in every region, everywhere, like this is Starbucks, right? It wouldn't even be close to probably that expensive. But what do you see? I mean, there's nobody talking about that as a benefit or as the digital distribution part. You can't do that with swell paper. You can't do that with anything else. But it's something that we're running into with the content that we already have. Do you think that would help grow the use of graphics that people could actually produce, well, even just print their own, right? The problem is we're having to do everything in each pocket. And so somebody comes up with a good idea over here with totally different technology, different software, everything else, and they can't share it with anybody else. So I guess that sharing part of that global community, has that come up within year 3?
It's a great point, and it sort of gets back to what I said earlier about the early problem that I ran into with TMAP, getting them into people's hands. So I think that that's again a really important big picture question. We're probably not gonna. I don't think that putting embossers into Starbucks is the answer. But I do think that a better a distribution network for tactile materials and subscription, maybe a subscription model where we can know who needs them, who wants them, and get them into their hands quickly. And of course, the Monarch is going to be it's you know, that's, I think that your math is right, but Jerry's math is also right. They're going to get cheaper. So we'll see where the lines cross as we go forward. I think we have to end it here. Greg, I'm going to hand it back over to you. Thank you, everybody.
Thank you. Thank you.
All right. Thank you so much to all of our speakers, our presenters today, to you who are the audience. I also have to thank our sponsors, our Waymo, our Zoox, our Uber, the Three Sticks Wine, all of our donors, our volunteers today. You know, a lot goes into pulling off this kind of event. Many staff working behind the scenes. I'd like to especially acknowledge the work that Naomi Rosenberg, Karen Thompson, Summer Sanzo-Dittmer put into planning for this event. They labored tirelessly planning for this. Very special shout out to hospitality chef Matt Beard and his crew. They prepared a lot of food. I'm pretty sure they put in a 12-hour day yesterday, preparing everything from scratch. This didn't come on a Safeway deli tray. They had raw, fresh ingredients that they transformed into food on skewers and things. Right. Oh, wait, there's more. There's more also in hospitality. Lindsay and Kian are new employees at the LightHouse. They've only been here a couple weeks, and they totally stepped up with logistical support for this event. That was very much appreciated. Ben Einstein in the Mad Lab, he's our AV person today. Our communications team has been very busy and involved, as is our partners at SensePoint in marketing. Bobby in facilities single-handedly set this room. I don't know if he's around, but you know, I want him to feel appreciated, and he oversees the janitorial crew that's going to clean this room when we're all done. The IT department stuck around to make sure that nothing went wrong at this event, technically, and I appreciate that. All of the resources that we mentioned today, there's a QR code in the programs that goes to a web page that has a lot of information captured about today's event. Speaker bios, the links to resources and things like that.
Thank you so much.
My name's Liz.
Kindly leave any of these sensational blackboards and pens on the table when you leave here. I need to get those blackboards back to Ting, who lent them to us. And
what's up? Oh, thanks.
And one last thing. Chancey had mentioned how growing up, she wasn't allowed to play with the swell machines, with the thermoform machines. We have them set up in 1040. If you want to play with them, you can come play with them right now. Thank you very much.
If you want to see the Mad Lab where the magic happens, follow me downstairs.
I forgot to mention that if you want to see where the magic happens, Frank is happy to lead some people down to the 9th floor. You can come check out the Mad Lab, go see where our machines are and all of that.